Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and build a simple portfolio and you're going to learn how to host this portfolio on the internet. Okay, so if you have not been following along with our introduction to programming with Python series, this project is for that tutorial series. So just like we have learned programming, like we have learned Python, we have learned the basics. So what can you do with the basics? What can you do with the programming knowledge, right? That's why we're going to go ahead and build this simple project. And we're also going to teach you how to host on the internet. So you can host on the internet. Anyone who wants access to it, or you can share the link with anyone, apply for jobs or anything like that. They can see your portfolio, your skills, what you have done so far, your skill level, the project you have done, and all of that, right? So this is just a project you're going to be building, by using our knowledge from Python that you have learned so far. So this is all you're going to be going ahead and building. Again, I'm going to go ahead and show you all everything from scratch and how to host everything. Okay, so don't worry about everything. I'm going to show you everything. You can see I'm just running this on my virtual on my computer. You can see I'm running it here, and this is a web application that we get whenever we run the application. So I'm going to show you how to build a simple application like that, and set everything up. So I'm going to do this on a Windows computer because most of you have Windows. So I thought that I do this on Windows so that it can also take me from my usual environment, away from my usual environment, so they can show you that to build a project in programming, you don't have to be an expert or anything. I just learn how to Google how to solve your errors. So we're going to do everything on a Windows machine, and I haven't used Windows in a long while, so I'm not comfortable using Windows. You can see I'm actually on a Linux machine, so I'm not comfortable using Windows at all. So I'm going to do this on the Windows machine so that we can all have that beginners or starting point perspective of things, right? We Google together, we run into errors together, we solve those errors. Because in programming, this is what programming really is, right? If you watch a lot of tutorials on YouTube, those programmers have already done all the stuff. They're just recording the video, right? Because they've already done everything. Now I'm not going to do I'm just going to show you how to do everything all the way from scratch, away from an environment that I'm used to working on, right? Because there is no point of just learning programming if you never build anything with your programming skills, right? So let's go ahead and jump into it. So I'm going to go ahead and shift into my Windows computer, and then we can get started. Hello guys, welcome back. So I've just shifted onto my Windows machine. So in here, that's we're going to go ahead and set up the web application. So let me just go ahead and do a quick stuff. Let's just jump into it. So I'm going to open up my CMD. If you're on Windows, you're going to open up your CMD. If you're on Linux or MacBook, you're going to open up your terminal. Okay. So once we have the terminal open up, now we're going to go ahead and change our directory into our desktop, right? So change the directory into my desktop. Instead of my desktop, remember we created a file called intro to Python. So if you do a dir, it's equivalent on Linux and MacBook. It's going to be sorry, if you do a dir, yeah, it's equivalent on MacBook and Linux. It's going to be ls. So if you're on MacBook and or MacBook or a Windows machine, sorry, MacBook or a Linux machine, you will be doing an ls instead of a dir. But dir is for Windows users. Okay. So once we are inside there, we're going to navigate into this folder, and this folder is on our desktop. So if I minimize this, you can see the folder right here. That's the folder that you want to navigate into. So I'm going to navigate into that folder. I'm just going to say change directory into intro to Python folder. And once I'm inside of that folder, you can see now we're inside of this folder. So right, if I do a dir, which is ls on Windows, on MacBook and Linux machine, you should now see every folder. You should see the content of that file. So if I go into my desktop, open this up, you can just see we have one file in there called path_01.py that we use for introduction to Python, right? So if you want to check that video introduction to Python, you can go ahead and check that whole series out. So we teach Python from the very basic, and this is a project you're doing after learning by the base of Python, right? So you're going to go ahead and create a folder in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear my terminal. I'm going to use CLS. If you're on Windows, if you're on MacBook and Linux, so you're going to type in clear, like clear, just like this. If you're on MacBook and Linux, but if you're on Windows, it's just CLS to clear the terminal. So once we have that, I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to use mkdir, and this is going to work for all operating systems. So mkdir, I'm going to call it Flask web. Let me just say Flask web app, just like that, and just simply press enter. So I'm going to now, if I do a dir, which is ls on MacBook and Linux machines, you should now see a folder called Flask web app here. So I'm going to change directory into that folder. So I change directory into that folder, and once I'm inside that folder, I'm going to just clear the terminal again. So we can do a dir. You can see that folder right now has nothing inside of it. So if you go ahead and you can see the folder in there, you can see we have nothing inside of that folder. So we've created the folder called Flask web app, and if I open it, there is nothing inside of it. Good. So once you're inside of that folder, what you want to do now is to create a virtual environment. So in Python, we have the global Python environment, and also have a virtual environment for different applications. It's always good to keep your things to keep your project dependencies away from your global Python dependencies, right? So That's what we're going to be doing right here. We're going to keep our global Python dependencies separate from our virtual, our project dependencies. So how do you create a virtual environment in Python? And to do that, you call it a virtual environment. It's just an environment that is separate from your global Python environment. It's called a virtual environment. So how do you create a virtual environment in Python? If you're on Windows, you use this command. So you say py, and you're going to say -m VNV and then VNV. So if you're on Windows, this command is going to work for you. Okay, just type in this. If you're on MacBook and on Linux machine, type in Python 3 instead of Py, right? So you type in Python 3. If you're on MacBook and or on Linux machine, you type in Python 3. But if you're on a Windows machine, just say Py -m VNV VNV. This VNV part here, everything here must be exactly as it is. But what comes next to this VNV can be anything. You call it my VNV. Some people also call it ENV. And I'm just going to call it VNV, which is just for a virtual environment. So I'm going to press enter. And that's going to take some time to create for us the virtual environment. So once a virtual environment is created, good. Now if I do a dir, which is ls on MacBook and on Linux machines, you should now see a folder called VNV. So if I go in here, you can see now a folder called VNV, and it has all this content inside of it. Good. So now we have our virtual environment created. Now we need to activate our virtual environment, because if your virtual environment is not activated, everything that you're going to install is going to be in the global Python environment, and that's not what we want. We want it to be inside of our virtual environment. So how do you do that? Let me just clear the terminal. Again, if you're on MacBook and Linux, you're typing clear, but if you're on Windows, it's just CLS. Okay, good. So once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and activate it. To activate it, you just have to say VNV for VNV /. If you're on Windows. If you're on Linux and MacBook, I will just show the command for that. For now, let's do it for Windows. Then be VNV /. You're going to say scripts, and then you're going to say / again. You're going to say activate.bat. Just say bat like this, and just press enter. Now you can see the name of the virtual environment is activated. And how do you know it's activated? If you look closely between these two lines, you can see a difference, right? The difference is that the name of the virtual environment is now virtual environment folder is now in front of the line within our terminal, which was previously not the case, right? So now that shows that we have our virtual environment created, and now it's activated. So if you look and see the name of the virtual environment is VNV, and now you can see VNV right here. Good. So that shows that our virtual environment is created. So good. We are ready to go now. You just have to install the package that we need to create our web application. Again, we talk about packages, right, when we're doing our introduction to Python series. So in Python, there's just a lot of stuff you can do with programming that sometimes some of the stuff you have to do are very basics, right? So if you create a web application, the process of creating a web application is very similar. The basics fundamental stuff are similar for no matter which web application you're creating. So to save a lot of time and to save us a lot of effort, programmers have come up with different libraries that they've already written to help you with the basic stuff and to enable you to quickly set up stuff and build upon it. Okay. So we have such a package called Flask in Python. That's what we're going to be using to build this web application. So we're going to go ahead and install Flask. And how do you install Flask in Python, or how do you install any Python package library? You have to say pip and then install and then the name of the package, right? So if you're not sure of it, you can just go online and just search Google link. Say let's just Google something. Let me just say how to install Flask in Python. So just press enter and just click on the first link. Mostly you get the link for the first link. So you're going to Stack Overflow link and see it says pip install Flask. So you see that's the simple we can install Flask in Python. So you can also go ahead and go to official documentation. You say Flask docs just like that, and you can go to the official documentation of Flask, and then from there you can go to let's see how you can install this. Let's go ahead and say Python versions installation. Okay, this is installation. You can click on it and then just can read through the installations and see the different stuff you need to do. So it explains to you if you're using Windows, MacBook. It shows you all the different steps you need to follow, right? Okay. So just go to Flask docs. Just type in Flask docs and then go with the first link, which you can welcome, which is flask.parallelsetprojects.com. Okay, and then just get that. Just type in Flask docs and just go with the first link. Okay. So once we have, you can see Flask is a micro framework written in Python. So it's just a library that is help us to build web applications, and it's a micro framework. What you call a micro framework. I'm not going to go into depth about all of that because you guys are just beginning. So I don't want to confuse you with all these terminologies and stuff like that. Okay. So that's basically it. How you can create a simple install Flask. So let's go ahead and simply run this command and just press enter. So sorry, I have to now specify which library I want to install. So pip install, and I want to install Flask and press enter. So now that's going to go ahead and install Flask on our virtual environment. So great, now Flask is installed. I'm just going to clear the terminal. So to activate the virtual environment for guys who are using MacBook and Linux machines, you have to say source /bin/activate. That's for guys who are using MacBooks or Linux machines, okay? But I'm not using a Windows machine, so I already showed you how to activate a virtual environment for Windows machine. So once you have that, and then if you're using Mac or Linux, the installation is the same. So if you're using a Linux or a MacBook, the installation is the same. Let's say pip install Flask, and it's going to go ahead and install. So now you can see I've already installed, so it says requirement already satisfied. So good. So I'm going to clear the terminal. Once we are good, that's all we need to do to install Flask. So good. So I'm going to go ahead and simply open up my Visual Studio Code. So go in and just type in VS Code. VS Code, and just go ahead and click on open. And once VS Code is opened up, so I just go ahead and close this file. This was just some files that I was working with, so I'm just going to go ahead and close them up. So good. So once I have everything closed up, so we have our folder in here called VNV. Again, if you want to open this folder, you can go to open folder, and then just go in here and then select this folder, and then select folder, and that's going to go ahead and open that specific folder specifically. So once we have that folder open, we are good to go. So we need to go ahead and set up our application so we can start creating our Flask web application. So I'm going to create a folder here. I'm going to call it portfolio. So I'm going to say portfolio, just like that, and press enter. So instead of this portfolio, I'm going to go ahead and create two folders in here. I'm going to call one templates. I'm going to create another one called static, static, just like that. And make sure that they are called exactly. Okay, I'll explain to you later on, but make sure it's called exactly templates with an S, and this one is called static without an S. Okay, and after that, you're going to go ahead and create an underscore init __.py folder. So if you watch the video or in our introduction to Python series, we talk about packages and we talk about the init __.py file. And I'm not going to go ahead and explain it in this tutorial. You can check out that tutorial when I talk about packages. So once we have this done, I'm going to create another file in here. I'm going to call this one routes.py, just like that. Press enter. So now we have our routes.py folder also created. So we are good to go to set up our web application. So what you have to do is just go inside of our __ init file, and this is just the project setup for a Flask application. If you go online, you find people setting up differently. But if you want to set up for building big applications and building best practices, this is the best way to do it. Okay, from my point of view, this is the best way to do it. There are thousands of ways to set it up, but this is the best way to do, and I want you to follow this approach. Okay, so once we have that done, I'm going to go ahead and import a couple of things. Okay, so once you just go ahead and say once you have everything set up, if you go inside of, you can click on this part of your code. So if you click on this part of your code, in your case, by default, it's going to be something like this. Okay, so let me just go ahead and I just set it back to default. Set it back to the default one, and I'm going to show you something. So I'm going to say from Flask, Flask, you're going to import Flask, and we talk about importations using when you're talking about packages and modules. Talk about importations. I'm not going to go ahead and explain what I'm just importing Flask from the Flask class. Okay, I'm just from Flask, I'm importing a class called Flask with a capital F. So the difference between this Flask and this one is just a capital F. This one is a capital F, this one is a small f. Okay, so once we have that set up, you can see now it says that Flask is not recognized or it's not resolved. So how do you solve that? You just need to go ahead and change your virtual environment. So just say, click on this and just say enter path, say find, and then go into your desktop, go into the Python, Flask, click on this, and then click on source scripts. And once you click on scripts, go ahead and click this one right here, the Python, and this the Python one without anything else, because this one have Python dot something. Just click on the one says Python, which is a bit dark in color, and just click on select interpreters. Once you have that selected, now you can see that error is gone, because you are using now you have told VS Code which which environment you are using, and you have told virtual code that you're using the environment that you just created, which is called the VNV virtual environment. So you just told VS Code to use that environment instead of the environment that it was using. Instead of using the global Python environment, which was not having Flask, that's why you're getting that warning. But now that you're using the direct environment, now you can see the warning is gone, right? So what I want to go ahead and do in here is just simply create an instance of the Flask of Flask. Okay, so I'm going to say create instance of Flask. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about what an instance is. We talk about all this when I'm talking about object-oriented programming. So if you haven't checked that video out on object-oriented programming, you can check out that video on object-oriented programming. So I'm going to simply say app, and it's going to be equals to Flask, and you're going to go and say underscore name and just underscore. So when you say Flask and then pass in the parentheses, and you say underscore name underscore. So that's how you can create a Flask instance. And also we need to say one more thing, and this is from portfolio, portfolio, and for portfolio is the name of this folder. So whatever you call it, you're going to say from that name, and then you're going to go ahead and say import. You're going to go ahead and import routes, and routes is this folder that you're importing. So from this package, you're importing this this module called routes. Okay, so once we have that imported, you're good to go. So I'm going to go into my routes, and I'm going to go ahead and say from portfolio. So if I'm going to say portfolio, I'm going to go ahead and import app just like that. And once I have that imported, and the reason you can do this import is because app is specified inside of the underscore init file. So I'm not going to go ahead and explain this. Again, you can check out the video on packages in introduction to Python series. So once we have this done, I'm just going to go ahead and create a simple decorator here. I'm just going to a decorator, and we talk about, I gave you a quick introduction to what a decorator is. We didn't go into depth, but we talk about, you can talk about classes, static classes, properties, and stuff like that. So this is the same concept that you're using. A decorator is just a callable that takes an input as a callable and returns a callable as an output. So we're going to say routes.get, and we're going to use a HTTP method called get. Don't worry about all this. Again, I have a whole series on web development on my channel, so you can check those videos out where I explain all this in depth. But this is just a simple introduction to web development with Python. So I'm not going to go ahead and cover all this in depth details. So if you want to do that, I'm going to leave a bunch of the tutorials in the description. You can check out any of those tutorials that you want. So we're just using a get method, and it's saying def, and we say index, and it's going to return. We're just going to return a string. For now, you say hello world, just like that. So now that's all I want to return. And now if you run the Flask application and you go to this route right here, /route, we're going to return to us hello world. So how do we get back? How do you run the application? So to run the application, you have to just go ahead and create another file in here. You can call it run.py. So run.py file, notice where run.py file is. Run.py file is in the same, is in the root directory, is in the same level as portfolio folder. Okay, so it's not within the portfolio folder, it's outside of the portfolio folder within the same directory, right? So good. So once we have in there, I'm going to go ahead and say from portfolio, I'm going to go ahead and import app, right? So I'm going to go ahead and run our app. We're going to say if underscore name underscore equals to sorry, let me just close this, equals to, you're going to go ahead and say underscore main underscore, and you're going to go here and say app.run. And we say debug is going to be we can say debug is going to be true. You can enable debug to be true. So once we have that done, we are good to go to run our application. So to run our application, what we simply have to do is simply run this run.py file. So how do you run that? So we go into the VS terminal, and then I'm going to do a dir to see where we are. So you can see we have the run.py file here. We have the portfolio folder right here, and also have our environment folder right here. So good, we are good to go into to run the virtual environment. Say py, and then run run.py, and run that file. If you're on MacBook and on Linux machine, say Python 3, right? So yeah, this is for Windows users. So say py and then run.py and then press enter. So it's going to start our development server running on localhost at port 8000. So in web development, we call this link, or whatever you can call it, we call it link. This link localhost localhost. So if you see anything in web development, is 127.0.0.1 is called localhost. And then you can see we have a colon, which is a colon right here, which is, you can read it as at, and then you have the name of the port. So if the person asks you on which port is your application running, you just look after the number that comes after the colon, which is this port, you call it port 5000. And you can change this port number if you want, but by default it's just Flask runs on port 5000 by default. You can change this if you want to, but I'm not going to change it in this tutorial. So just simply copy this right here. Just copy it. Let's highlight it and press Ctrl and C on your keyboard. Go into your terminal and then open up a new browser, and then simply paste it in there and press enter. So now you can see we're getting back hello and hello world, and that's what you're being returned. That's what you're returning from this index point. So if a person goes to /, it's going to return to us hello. So if I change this word to if I change this to be / and then hello, and if I go back in here to our web application, and if I refresh, you can see page not found, because there's no route that deals with that page. So I have to go in here and simply type in / and just say hello and press enter. Now you can see you're getting back hello world. So that's how routing works. And I'm not going to go again. I'm not going to go into routing because this is not like I don't want to go too much into web development. I have a lot of tutorials on my YouTube channel. You can check it out if you are interested in. This is just to build a project to get you up to date to what we can do with Python, right? So if you're interested, you can go ahead and check out other videos and dive deep into web development. I have a lot of videos on my YouTube channel on Flask where I explain things in much depth. Okay, So yeah, that's all it takes to set up a simple web application. So we already have a web application right here, and you can put this on the internet, and if a person accesses it, it's gonna just see hello world. So congrats, you have built your first web application. Again, you can also return HTML file, HTML tags in here. Again, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with HTML, but I'm not going to cover this HTML in here in this tutorial because this is for mainly Python and not web development. So if you guys want me to make a video on introduction to HTML, let me know. But this is just HTML tag. This call this one the opening tag, and we call this one the closing tag. So these are just some web development stuff. So if I go ahead and refresh this, now you can see now it's more bold, right? So these are HTML tags that we have. We have different HTML tags. So good. So you can actually just go in here, create a multi-string, and then simply return a whole HTML structure in here if you want. So if you guys who are comfortable with HTML, you probably know what this is, right? So this say hello world, and I can just close off that h1 tag. I can go down here and say h2, and just say hello world, and just close off the h2 tag. And you can just repeat the same stuff. So let me just copy this and repeat it a couple of times. So copy this, control C, control V, control V. So I need to go down, control V and control V. So let's change this to be, this would be 3, and also this should be 3, right? So change it to be 3, and this should be 4. So change it to be 4. These are just HTML tags. Again, I'm not going to go into data about HTML tags. They're up to 6 of this, so you can just copy this one more time and just simply go down and simply paste it, and this is going to be 6. Again, I'm not going to go ahead and talk about HTML tags. So guys who are comfortable with HTML, you probably know what this is, right? So if I go in here and refresh this, now if I just zoom out a bit, now you can see we have all those HTML stuff right here. So that's basically how you can create a simple web application using Flask. Again, I'm not going to I'm not going to go into the HTML part of this. Again, you can check out my YouTube channel for more on web development. Okay, that's how you can create a simple web application. So good. But most of the time, you don't want to go ahead and start writing your HTML in here, because if you guys are familiar with HTML, you know that HTML can become really a lot of code. 500, sorry, not 500, but yeah, it can reach 500 if you want it to. But mainly HTML files have a lot of lines of code, 300, 200 lines of code. So you can't write 200 lines of code inside of the string. Yeah, you can, but it's not best practice. Yeah, so let's show you how to return a HTML file instead. That's why you have this folder called templates, and instead of this folder called templates, that's why you create your HTML folder. So just go in here, create a folder called, a file called index.html file. Okay, so I'm going to go in there and just press shift and 1 on my keyboard and press enter, right? The exclamation. Let's call it portfolio, just like that. And you're going to simply go ahead and copy the HTML stuff from here. I'm just going to go ahead and simply cut it from here and simply go ahead and paste it in the body right here. So good, we have the HTML right here. And now we need to return this HTML file instead of, we need to return this HTML file instead of just the string, right? So let's go ahead and actually return it. To return it, you have to go ahead and say import something. So say from, I need to say from Flask. I'm going to go ahead and import render template. So render template. Yeah, so once you have render template import, I can just go and say return render template and specify the name of the file that you want to return. You have to specify the name of the file which you want to return, index.html. So I have to go in and type in index.html. So the Flask knows by itself, by Flask is programmed directly to know to go and look for the templates instead of the templates folder. That's why you have to call it exactly templates, right? Templates is an S at the end, so it's templates. So Flask is going to go in and look inside of this folder and look for this file that you're specified in here. So it's going to go in here and look for this file. It's going to file this file, and it's going to return to us the HTML content of this file. So if I go back in the web application and if I hit refresh, now you can see get back the same content. So if I go ahead and click on inspect, now you can see the whole HTML stuff from that folder, which is in here, right? So you can see it right here. So good. If that shows everything that we want to do, that shows everything I wanted to show. You can actually write more HTML. You can write an input field if you want input, and then say, yeah, just something like that. And if you go and refresh, you can find the input field right here, right? So good. That's basically it. Again, I'm not going to cover the HTML. So that's basically how you can return stuff. You can return HTML files from your in a Flask application. And also we have this folder called static. What does the static folder do? So the static folder, what it simply does, it holds your static stuff like your CSS files, your JavaScript files, your images, and other stuff that you're using in a web application. You can keep all of them inside of your static file. Again, I know some of you are new to programming, or are new to are new to programming maybe, or are new to web development. So you probably not be okay, you'll probably be wondering what a JavaScript file is. So JavaScript is another programming language that is mostly used on the web. Okay, I don't want to go too much into that. We also have CSS, which is stands for cascading style sheet, which is used to make your web applications look good. So let's say that you want to give this a color. You can write the CSS for the style, and you can say color, and you can say color is red. So this a bit of CSS. So if I go ahead and run application again, now you can see this has changed to red. So that's CSS, and you can keep the CSS stuff inside of its own file, and then you can do like that. So you can say, let's change the font. I can change even the font weight, font family is let's say the font family is this one. So if I go back and refresh, now you can see even the font has changed. So yeah, that's basically what CSS is basically, and you can do a lot of stuff with that. So the CSS files, the JavaScript files are all kept inside of the static, along with images, right? Those are static files and are all kept in the static folder, and you can refer to them using kind of a very strange syntax that we'll look at a bit. Okay, so to actually make things much more simpler, because I'm not going to going over HTML, what is CSS and all that, what is JavaScript. I have everything already prepared on my GitHub page, so you guys can find access to it. So I actually lost internet, so let me just try to refresh this. Let me just reconnect to my internet. I'll be back. Yeah, guys, I just reconnected to my internet and I'm back here. So now on my GitHub page, I have this file called Python 0 to hero. So if you go to my GitHub page, you can just search for me on GitHub. I'll leave the link to this in the description so that you guys don't have to go and search for it. If you want to go search for it, just type in Prince Grandpa GitHub and you get my GitHub page and click on repositories. And once you are there, you can click on Python. You can find it. You just type in here Python, because maybe by the time you reach there, I might have uploaded other stuff. So Python 0 to hero might not be the first folder. Okay, so just click on that. You can also search for it in the search field and just type in Python 0 to hero. And once you are in there, you can go ahead and actually find everything. So even the folder that we use in our introduction to Python series, where we install the VS Code, we install Python, everything, you can find all of it inside of this folder right here, inside of this repository. So I want you to go ahead and simply clone this repository. So just go ahead and say download zip file. We're going to download the zip file of this repository. So let's go ahead and actually, okay, it has downloaded the zip file. So I want to go ahead and let me just go into my downloads. If I go into my downloads, I can go ahead and let me try to extract all. So let me just say next. Okay, and we have extracted it right here. So you can see it's right here. If I open it up, now we have this is the whole thing that I want. So what I want to go ahead and do here, if you open up one of this file, if you go into portfolio, right, and if you go into the just templates, and I can just go ahead and open up this in VS Code. So I can just minimize this and I can just drag and drop it in. Let me just close this up. So let me open up my VS Code and I can open up the file explorer. So I can just simply go ahead and drag and drop. Let me just see. Let me see if I can drag and drop this. So let me just drag and drop this right here and just say open. So once you open it up, you can see all the content of that file. So let me just close my side panel. You can see all the content of that file. So these are just some HTML and CSS stuff. So I'm using Tailwind CSS. You can Google Tailwind CSS if you want to know what Tailwind CSS is. So let me just go ahead and actually copy everything from this file. I'm going to copy it and then go into my inside of this file where we have this hello world. And I want to select everything and then hit Control A and then Control V to paste everything and Control S to save. So good. So I've pasted everything. So now let's go back to our web application, and in here, let me just refresh. Now if I refresh, now you can see the layout has changed. Let me just zoom out to 100. So now you can see we have all this content in here, right? So good. We are good to go. So now you can see all the content in here, and all this content in here is you can find all that stuff inside of the index.html file on my GitHub page. So you can even go to GitHub page and simply just go into here and then go to portfolio and go into templates and then search for that index file. You can just actually copy the code from here, right? So this is the same code that we have in here, and it is what is giving us this display right here. So you can see it's just a portfolio website, basically Python. You're a Python programmer, you do the basics of web development, right, which you're doing right now. You did a bit of data scientist, which you're going to cover we're going to, in our series on data science. I'm going to do a couple of projects with data science in this tutorial, so I can see all that information. So you can actually edit this and add more stuff to it. But I'm not going, again, I told you this is not a web development course, so I'm not going to stress on the HTML and CSS part. So let's quickly jump into it. Now you can see the images are missing, right? So how do you let's make sure we have those images. So if I go into my VS Code, let me just explain to you a couple of things. So if I go into my VS Code, let me just start from the very top to make sure I explain to you every little detail. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, and the first I want to say I have a custom CSS and explain to you what CSS is. Cascading style sheet that controls like the styling of your web application. So you can see I have this thing called URL underscore for, and then this URL for, okay, let me start from here. So you have two opening curly braces and then two closing curly braces, and then in there you're going to say URL for, and this is a function that we need to import. So I need to go in here and just say comma and say URL for, and just make sure I import that. Okay, so let me just close this for now. So I'll be only using this file right here. So you're just saying you're saying the URL for, and you're saying this is from static folder. So again, the folder name is going to be static. So let me just open up my side panel. So you're referring to this folder right here called static, right? The static folder right here, and that's what you're referring to. And you're referring to a file called in a folder called css/main. So in a folder called css, we're having a file called main. So let's go ahead and actually create that. So I'm going to go in here, create a file called create a folder rather, create a folder called css, and press enter. And instead of that css folder, I want to create a file. I'm going to call it main.css. Just like, and press enter, and this is the same directory you're seeing here. So we're going to static folder, going to a folder called css. If I look for a file called main.css, and that's what this is how you can refer to static files inside of a Flask. Okay, if you're using Flask, this is called Ginger templating. Okay, this because Flask using something called the Ginger templating engine, and yeah, you can read more about it again on the official documentation of Flask. If you check that official documentation of Flask, you'll be able to find it. So just go ahead and search for Flask docs and then press enter, and you just read about it on the official documentation of Flask. So you can see the Ginger template documentation and all that stuff. So you can go ahead and read about it. Again, I have a lot of tutorials covering this on my YouTube page, so I'm not going to go ahead and cover them in this video. Okay, so you can read about all this. Okay, I'm not going to go ahead and cover them in this video. If you want, you can take a look at my videos on introduction to web development with Flask series. Okay, so the link to those videos are going to be in the description, right? So that's basically how you can refer to static files. And let's see if you are also here referring to a file called instead of a static folder, referring to a file called main.js. So let's go ahead and create that file. So in I'm going to create the file. I'm going to call it main.js and press enter. So yeah, we have our static folder and also have our main.js file. So if you go back to what you have installed, so let me just bring this back here. If I go back here, and if I go into my static, I can see this one main.js. So if I go ahead and drag and drop it here, I can just copy the content and simply go ahead and paste it in here. Good. So now I can close off that. So that's what we want. And good. So we have that. We'll also look for other static files that we need. So let me just go back and refresh the page. If I go in here and refresh the page, yeah, everything now works. But now we see we are still lacking the images, right? So let's make sure that we refer to those images. And how do you refer to those images? Again, you can go ahead and find the images folder, which is right here. So I can just simply copy that. I can just simply copy that, and I can go ahead into my VS Code and simply paste it instead of my static. I'm going to go ahead and simply paste it. Let me just go ahead and paste it in here. Okay, I can't really paste it in here, so let me just go ahead and copy it from here. Copy it, and I'm going to go into my desktop here, and then go to in here, and then go into our portfolio static, and then simply paste it in here. So paste, how do you paste? Okay, so paste it in here. Yeah, so you have pasted it in there. I haven't used Windows in a long while, so I'm not familiar with Windows. Okay, so now you have pasted this in here, and now you should be able to refer to those images and get access to those image files. And if you look here, I am referring to that a couple of times. So for example, here I'm referring to it, a static folder. Look for a folder called images, which we already have right here. Look for a file called image underscore 01.png, which is going to be this image file right here, this image file. So, and that's what is controlling the, if I go back and refresh the page right now, sorry, I'm going to go in here and refresh. Now you can see that image is right here. So that's basically it. Now you can see all the images are all showing and everything looks perfect, right? So that's how it is to create a simple web application using Flask. Again, I don't want to go into depth talking about the intricate details on how to get stuff done and all of that. So even if you change this on a mobile view, let's say that you are on let's say an iPhone 12. So on an iPhone 12, the web application is going to look like this, right? So yeah, that's basically it. Again, you can customize it to make your keep your own wordings in here and keep your own stuff in here. Also, game development, we have already looked at game development already. You're going to look at it, okay? So I think yeah, we're going to look at it. So we do the web development first, and then we jump into game development. So next tutorial, I'll start posting videos on how to develop games in Python. Again, once you do that, you can update this page, add stuff in here, explain to people that you have done game development, and then I'll also host this website online, right? So anybody can access it and see your skills and what you have done so far. And also we'll do the part of data science. So once you do that, you can keep your portfolio link in here. You can put stuff in here. And web development is just like you can do web development with Flask, and we also can do web development, web applications using Django in Python. And I have a lot of videos on Django on my YouTube page, so you can also check out that video on Django, where we build different projects with Django. Yeah, so that's basically it for this. If you want to change the name here, you can go back into the code, look for that place where it say John. Hello, my name is John. You can say, well, my name is John. Let's say my name is John Doe, just like that. And once you go in here, you can refresh. Now you can see my name is John Doe. So yeah, that's basically it for web development using Python. So now what you are left to do is actually push this to the to GitHub, and then finally deploy this on the internet. And that's what we're going to be covering in the next video. Okay. Yeah, so guys, thanks for watching this video. If you like this video or you like this content, again, if you have not checked out the beginning part of this series where we are talking about learning programming with Python, like introduction to programming with Python, this is part of that course. So if you haven't checked out that course, you can go ahead and check out that course. That's why I have not explained a lot of things in depth, because we covered most of it in that course, right? So yeah,